Yeah. My initial thought on it was less like games that are poorly made and like buggy and glitchy because those are easy to bash on. I don't know what our takeaways from that would be, but we can also talk about that. And more talking about games that are like made well, but problematically, or
Like it's more design problems rather than.
yeah, games made even with a lot of resources. Matt.
So I feel like bad games could also be referenced about bad design choices or making things not accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe later at
Yeah,
some point, or that we have like a bigger discussion about how work and social options and things.
I'd allow it. Yeah.
Um, I would say like something that can be like a big signifier of a bad game is when developers just make something completely dissonant to what either what their series is or what the fans are like expecting. So I would say Mass Effect Andromeda, where they just were like, all right, let's just make it kind of a shooter with a little bit of story and also throw it to an amateur dev team and another one. Ironically, also EA, Battlefield 2042, but we're not going to have classes anymore that we've had for 22 years, 23 years. We're going to just make it so this hero specialist because the game's like,
How many of you have looked at this fiasco already?
I, I, I didn't see the individual breakdown, but I love how it breaks down, each category.
Yeah, so Blizzard put out a whole press release about their new diversity tool with the title on the release, A Leap Forward for Inclusion in Gaming. This was something that they were very proud of. And it showed that also one of my favorite things is that McCree's name is still McCree in this.
Oh, that's great. That's brilliant. I love it.
Um, so internally, I guess it's still McCree, which is fun. But they evaluate every character along these axes and assign them a score of diversity to tally up like how diverse that character is, how diverse their roster is along those axes as a whole. Um, and it's really problematic, um, largely because how do you assign numerical values to these things? Why do you have to assign numerical value to these things? And why can't you treat marginalized people like people instead of saying, oh, your culture is Egyptian, which is a 7, or as we like to call it at Blizzard, 2.5 Brazil's worth of culture. And I'm really, really interested to see what some of these other, like, facial features, 5 points per woman. I think my personal favorite is that middle class is 0 for diversity. And I have a sneaking suspicion that they're like super rich characters are considered more diverse by them.
Oh,
Anyway, let's discuss.
I also love that being slightly aged to describe someone in her golden years, and slightly aged is at a 1. Like that's not very diverse.
Well, she is 60 years old, but to be fair, she's still slim and curvy. Just sent out like screenshots of it. So it was like this one and
It's like if you have, I guess if you have a mental condition, or if you're like neurotypical or neurodivergent, I guess. To be honest, I think they would choose much ruder words that I can't repeat here to describe mental.
Lucio is the least diverse hero here.
obviously.
Yeah, he's got. He and Zarya rank the same in culture, which is definitely interesting. Exactly. Yeah, Scorpio is the most diverse.
Old, like a multi-entity.
Are you sure you can't find the, I thought you could go on the website.
I think it's just an internal tool.
I wish.
God,
I really want to know what Bastion's biodiversity story is.
I think like at the end of the day, what's really important to recognize here is what's at the center.
God, I really want to know for sexual orientation if any other character is like, if any other character is different between straight or gay. And I say this as respectfully as possible. I want to know if they refer to being gay or not straight as being homosexual, which seems like a very clinical way to classify being gay. I know we can just spend all session talking about this. This is so incredible and terrible.
On the topic of sexuality, I heard whispers that like it was because of this tool and realizing that Soldier 76 was too simple to be made him gay.
That
And to increase the diversity score.
That begs the question because I actually just looked this up and a prominent article that's headline right now is saying Overwatch creators explain they didn't use this creepy diversity chart. It's a whole ass article, but you know, if this tool was created relatively recently and Overwatch, at least some Overwatch developers are saying we didn't do this, then I'm not sure. Although I am now reading that this diversity space tool was used by the people who worked on Call of Duty Vanguard. So apparently it goes back at least to last year.
Call of Duty 23 Vanguard?
What?
Call of Duty 23?
No, last year's Vanguard, 2021.
No, I know, it's the 23rd Call of Duty.
Oh, the 23rd. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, I was messing around.
Why would it?
I heard they use this tool, like they demonstrated it by using it on Nintendo characters.
Oh my god.
And they were like, they score super low. Mario's okay because he's a shorter than average man. And things like that. Oh, Italian's not diverse. That's like half of the Brazil.
That's fair.
That's fair. Oh. No, it's just, and I saw that and I'm just like, but,
That's because I'm kind of gross, but how's this one?
Wait,
That's
they're as non-humans, they should be sold.
To connect this to the broader topic without what bad
He's trying
games,
to use all, the Zenyatta is on this chart.
the game's doing a bad thing,
Bastion's
a bad job
not-
at representing.
Bastion's not on, no, it's categorized on this chart.
I'm sorry. I love the dichotomy of you trying to continue at those two. Things of the chart, but
He's used.
but please continue. I definitely get your point.
So this is bad.
This is bad.
We all agree this is bad, and it also is a upsettingly clear demonstration of this is normal and everything else is different. For mile, I'm sure you've all seen that, like, compiled image of, like, video game protagonists of every, like, video game that's made over X million dollars. All, you know, gun bag. It's green face, white man, brown man. So, I think that's bad. I think that's, I think that's something that a lot of well-made games underline do poorly. So bringing it from representation to accessibility, and we think of some games that have been so stuck in here that they haven't made like very basic performances for other people to be able to play the game, to be able to play the game successfully, to be able to see themselves represented in the game.
So I don't have a specific example right now, but it kind of reminded me of yesterday, and during one of the talks, I don't know. But thing is to date, and he made the comment that his sister likes playing games where you customization options, and he was like, oh, I think like females or women like games where you have customization options. And I think the unsaid part of that is because we're often not represented or misrepresented in so many games that customization gives us the opportunity to express gender identity and feel more connected to the game.
Absolutely. And a lot of games have definitely, even those that have made gestures that have been very messed up in really important ways. Like I believe Assassin's Creed Odyssey in the DLC that wraps up the story of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. In Odyssey, you can play as a male or female character, which is one of the first, maybe the first Assassin's Creed game that could do that.
It was the first side from like
Believe it
the
was
side game where you could only meet
Yeah. So the way that they wrapped up the DLC for that was by having your character have a kid, which was very like invasive for some people who didn't see their character that way, and also regarding sexuality. In Odyssey, you can romance male or female characters as a name. But in the DLC, you are canonically written in to have a partner of the opposite sex and to have a child with that, which totally takes away and invalidates the like token representation, the token customization they have. You don't let you customize the character, they just let you choose male or female. And in theory, they can accommodate you role playing or sexuality, but then in the end, they just pull the rug in.
Similarly, I haven't played this game, but one of the first games had different thought paths based on if you said male or female. In which there were like different endings that would happen. So if you chose male, you would have like romantic options, everything. If you chose female, like the game would just end halfway through of what the male playthrough. And people didn't realize it until they would start talking about it, and you're like, wait, there's more to the game? I thought it just ended. I'm like, no, there's like an ending where stuff happens. So that's probably
Insane, I haven't heard of it.
So you bring up Assassin's Creed and specifically the song makes me think of my quickly access the computer just to someone else can go if they want. It'll take me a second to pull this up.
Another one I could bring up is that this was a smaller case. I think they really did a good job with it, but from the Mass Effect games, you could be male, female, male or female, and customize female or female options that they gave. But there were times when the animations were very obviously meant for the male character, and there was no option for that animation. So if you were the female character at the time, it was just you're just it's one of those things where you watch it, you're just kind of like, huh? Because it just the motions and the things they do just don't particularly make sense. That seemed to just be a concession to the fact that they were trying to make it mainly for the male characters and not as much for the female.
I'm sort of like going to that, but I haven't played any Mass Effect, but there's a character, Jack, who, correct me if I'm wrong, was originally either going to be like bisexual or romanceable by, character, not new. Story, or featured this in a story, a video game, and it was changed.
I believe that's correct. That is after Fox News also ran a smear campaign about the first game that actually caused a lot of drama.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if BioWare was like, please just shut up, we're fine, whatever, because they already went through the court case once because of it. So they might have been for the pressure. I don't know.
That's a hard one because with BioWare, you can at least see their perspective was the drama behind the scenes, and it's Fox News, but on the other hand, it's like they more or less gave into the pressure. So there's a lot that could be extrapolated from that, but it's definitely a tricky scene. But I'm also glad that you brought up this topic, Devin, about bad games, because there are a lot of bad games that are enjoyable, and there are a lot of bad games that are just offensive in some way or form or otherwise terribly designed. And that line can be super objective, but when it comes to a really bad game, one sticks out. What it ultimately is Tom Clancy's Elite Squad, which was just a throwaway mobile game. But it gained a lot of attention in 2020 specifically because it was using iconography and language of specifically Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020 to showcase a shadowy organization that was conspiring to overthrow the world. This was made by Ubisoft. This also came around at the same time that it was known that Ubisoft was filled with tons of abusers and otherwise just absolutely well, and this game just really sticks out as being a game that's flaunting its bad decisions, for lack of a better term. Like, obviously, a game like this would have been in the works for a while. It would have been directly made in result of the protests that were going on that same year. But the fact that it was announced in the same period that these protests were going on using the very same language, that just still sticks out to me 2 years later as being like something truly like horrendous. And all this just for a crappy mobile game that nobody remembered a month after it came out. And, you know, as a game designer, there are some decisions that you have to like assert and like, well, would we have done better if we were working on the studio? But you look at something like this and you wonder, what the hell were they actually thinking? Who would make the same mistake unless they were specifically being from sort of the same goes for a couple of different things. Like some mistakes are easier to see in hindsight, like the forced straight ending for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But then there are others where it really begs the question of who actually made it, what was going through their heads, and why. This to me is just awful, awful trash.
Like Quantic Dream is entirely run by David Cage.
Exactly.
And both the game featuring Elliot Page with the terrible model nude body that they did not consent to. And then additionally, the entire game is written from humans for yeah, not about representation. It's selling for things to art. Why this probably made it. People Punch is actually doing these pieces of artwork for commission to do the pieces of art, whether they had thought or not, of whether they liked this.
Yeah.
Executives, you know, that process produced this because they thought it's sellable to the game.
That is very
But it's pretty funny to me that this is. Oh,
yeah.
they decided to do this for a mobile game as if it would make anyone buy the Tom Clancy game.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing that important point up about the artist as well, because I think that's also something that's easy for everyone to get, that's easy for me to forget, is the fact that a lot of artists make this stuff not knowing what it's actually going to be used for. And there's more than one case about that. I think some artists did discover what they were actually working on, but they got fixed over it. So I think that's something that is also important. But thank you for bringing that up. That's very, very important. I'll give the floor back to Devin. No, it's something else this time. But while we're on race and politics in games, first you talked about favorite game specifically, and that sort of like executive order coming down, and there's a lot of other like troubling examples too. Like I saw recently uh, some of the artists from the Eternal, they're talking about Eternal has by video game standards, an absolutely ancient white woman with her hair. She's like 45. One of
Say
the oldest.
42, because I'm pretty sure that's the oldest possible age that anyone in the world can be.
That would
Sorry,
be,
42.
that would be like a 9.5 on the British. 42 to what?
Anna was 60 and it was only a 7.
Well, she's still slim and curvy. Uh, and the artist was kept like trying to visibly age her, not just for like that even that old, but like how women look, how people look, and they kept getting from me. But not mother, because that's way too far. Because that's like this guy.
Without spilling anything in return.
There are parts where you see, like, I know it's various contextual story. I don't know the context of the main character in the story, which is really well written, by the way. You should really check it out if you buy a PS5. But yeah, no, I definitely think that if the character herself actually older, it would make a lot more sense because the story revolves around her crashing on a planet that her mother visited when she was an astronaut in NASA. Now we are like forward, and it doesn't. It's the eternal return because you're constantly returning to the planet, and that's the whole.
Okay, I'm only going to talk about games that's quickly. And before I bring it to my first example of bad race and politics representation, can you think of other older women who are playable protagonist in video games? Who's the oldest? But except for
Oh, she's only middle-aged, but the protagonist in a game called Heaven's Vault, about space archaeologist, who was like definitely a middle-aged academic, and it's not a playable character. The main human relationship in it is between her and her thesis advisor, who is an older woman. So I think that is a representation of at least a relationship between two fully adult professional women, and it's still in a sci-fi setting. It's not like a dating game.
He plays a grandma and Watch Dogs with David. It's weird. Not really in the spirit of it.
Why would I thought the main protagonist name is William?
that's sort of the range of hair and white skin. So much more than even the representation of one thing. The problem is, and remember, remarkable. Anyway, my favorite example, my least favorite example, again, I try to play games without bad politics. That doesn't seem fun to me. So this one caught me by surprise. Who has played Bioshock Infinite?
Oh my god, yes, I know where you're going with this. I hate that game so much.
So Bioshock Infinite takes place in a hyper-nationalist American alternate timeline, utopia slash dystopia. This floating city in the sky where everything's perfect and everybody plays. And there's even a part in the game where you can participate in basically stoning an interracial couple. Just like the political and racial atmosphere. Um, anyway, at a point in the game, there is a revolution in the city where a populist element, the people of color, poor people, rise up. And the game is disturbingly both sides of it. Considering that one side is like, definitely for couples to death. The other side is portrayed as extremely like bloodthirsty, almost animalistic, in that they murder everyone, civilians, children, and then you have to stop them, which was not where I thought that was going when I was playing that. And that had been basically so many levels of approval. First every stage of implementation. So I don't know what it says about the culture of the future games. I think if we were to look at the credits of Bioshock Infinite, we would sort of have a hint at where that might come from. But
Yeah, so there's they go further with it, make it even more fucked up, that in that game, there's an alternate, like, negative universe in which the main character joins that group of rebels and die fighting for it. And in this negative universe, that's the connotation. That you are the bad guy because you could have helped them, but if you did, that'd be fucked up.
If I may add, the context is even more shocking because how it goes is your character helped the revolution but then died. You show up and try to help them, but they think you're an imposter, and rather than try to explain your way out of it, they just make you permanent. They just make the boss permanently hostile to you, so then you have to fight them, and then you have to go, oh, I guess both sides are bad. And the worst part is that you actually have to kill the leader of the Vox Populi, who is the only named black woman in the entire game. No choice. You have to kill her. And you have the option of sparing a white antagonist earlier. It's bad. That's been a sore. That was a sore point for me even when I played it, and it's been stuck in my mind since just how bad the game is.
Entire, like, the ending of the game just tries to act as like a catch-all. So like, oh, well, there's. So this was only one of the options, and I was sitting there and I'm kind of like, I guess. Yeah, like this is the one that I quote unquote chose,
Not really reflecting.
aka the developer.
It's not reflected in the freaking
Like in the game, there's the one universe that made it all. I wanted to go with the multiverse like
I know exactly. If they like you control all the different like universes, if they bring so many together at the end, that would have actually been alien. And understandably, that's ridiculously hard to make. Like you can't make the true. I mean, but yeah, it's just the ending was like tried to seem to kind of they tried to cover it up like
Didn't work. And I think there's a possibility executive meddling or constant rewrites might have also been a part because earlier drafts of the game are more sympathetic to the revolutionaries, or at least paint the protagonists of the game. It is definitely bad, and I'm glad you brought it up because that game irritated the hell out of me because it was so popular in 2013. I was excited to play it for years because everyone said it was so good. I played it in 2017 and I got progressively more judgmental as I played more of it. I was surprised nobody seemingly talked about this, but then maybe I missed it.
So we've talked about a lot of bad games, successful and accepted. games and big games have done poorly. And I feel like it's not good that that's so far going. Probably not maybe the mistakes that we've been talking about on the actually the illusion of representation, race, and politics, and gender and sexuality, all of these things. How do you know, how do you make a game in a responsible process to avoid pitfalls?
Peer review. Like one of the biggest things, have someone else look at it, different perspectives. It's one of the best things you can have for any type of creative process.
Oh, boy.
So, specifically, Bioshock Infinite, I guess, is the add on there. From what I understand, the lead guy who typically writes all of their stuff,
He left.
well,
Right?
he left after that, and I have heard that his new studio hasn't actually made anything, but is just constantly in turmoil because of him basically being a dictator. So it wouldn't surprise me if he just had the first and last say on Bioshock Infinite, and did probably rewrite it.
I don't think it's an issue if somebody even knows what they're doing that properly understands. Yeah, that, like, yeah, I don't know how many of you guys played. This was going to be what I was about to say, but SimCity 2013, you all know who Will Wright is, right?
Yeah.
So he was on SimCity 2013 as like a consulting person, but he wasn't there as a person to actually help make the game. And the game was made by an internalized team of multiple directors, each handling different parts of the game, as I understand it. That meant that you were kind of playing a bunch of different games at once. The idea was that you'd have multiple different kinds of city builders, where one person played like industry, and one person was residential, and another was commercial, and you all have different cities that do different things and rely on one another. Which meant that there were a lot of disjointed and gross systems. So this is the homeless individuals in a city being marked by like these yellow things, which on the surface is fine. But it's once you kind of get into the methodologies of actually fixing this problem, you don't have that many options. You can't simply build homeless shelters. That doesn't fix the problem. You can't raise the minimum income to increase employment opportunities and create programs. You can't do any of that. However, one thing that you can do is give out free bus tickets to every single homeless person in your city to send them to a different city, which is a real thing. That's a real thing that was really done. Do you want to know what happens? All of the homeless people will just congregate in a new city, and then because there are not as many homeless people, but you never fix the problem of people becoming homeless, you keep getting more homeless people in your residential zones. What's the issue with this? There's a million issues with this.
Sorry, I raised my hand.
Go ahead.
Like, what's the issue with this? I have
Yeah, I thought that was kind of.
You can
Probably
if you bulldoze the lot they're on, they just move. It's weird.
insane. All you have is a bulldozer.
Yeah.
No, but what I wanted to say is that we've had comments in both directions on the leadership structures and styles, and I don't think that solve whether it gets you to a trade-off. And some situations like the fact that every AAA game up until maybe like 2017 has a buff white dude with short brown hair and a glowering eyebrow is because that is the thing that market tests the best with gamers. Made it as safe as they possibly can. So when you have a leadership style where it's more corporate and there's a lot of boards that are, putting input on it, those are the decisions sometimes that you get. So, the way to fix that would be to give one person with a clear creative vision the ability to, craft a story that again has like a consistent vision. And then the downside of that is if that person is David Cage, then you get David Cage shit and nobody can tell him no. So I don't know that there's necessarily a way out of it. I think you can have community-based things that give better results. I think you can have kind of single vision things that give good results. But I don't know that there's a structural solution other than, I mean, I think the most effective thing that I can think of is, what's already been mentioned, is talking to constituent communities and play testing just a very wide variety of people. In my mind, play testing with diverse communities functions better than like specific sensitivity consultants or something like that.
Recently, that was very recently published. It was peer reviewed and I can't remember, but I'll find it. But it was specifically about why things like this kind of representation in games got people angry, because it cannot be as simple as they are racist, right? It's more than that. It's about this predetermined subculture and subversive identity that players of Wolfenstein and Call of Duty and Halo and Titanfall all have with these white male protagonists. And then once this happens, there's sort of an internal disrupt that they don't even know about, right? And how do you overcome that, and what methods can you use? And what they kind of cited was like, yeah, you have to just basically make everything very, very real, so that you can't even think like, why is this the way that it is? It just is the way that it is, because that's how they went about writing that story, right? And yeah, it's a very complex thing, but I think it's very easy for us to say like, oh, there's just a bunch of white dudes in gaming, and that's very marketable, and that's true. But it's also like, why does this cause such an uproar? Like, why did you all see the Star Wars tweet recently?
Oh no.
You didn't see the Star Wars tweet? It was like, they literally just said like, don't be racist.
Oh,
People got upset.
Visitor character in Black Woman. Yeah. But yeah, she had some like racist comments on either Twitter or Instagram. Posted a picture of them, and so then the official Star Wars pages all were like, there's like 30 million species in the Star Wars universe. Don't choose to be racist. And it was like, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you should not be getting angry at that, right? Part of its problem.
And so the thing that sucks is like, if you're a Star Wars fan, I keep in touch with like, watch or read something. I like look at stuff about it. And I'm seeing, like, what I see so much of is a lot of people don't like her performance in the show. At least that's what they're saying. And I'm like, so it's like, it's one of those things where the criticism, you gotta wonder where the criticism begins. Is it actually this criticism, that criticism? There is a lot of people critiquing people critiquing Rose as well, but at the same time, her sub arc was really bad in the movie, like the plot element that she was involved in. And then so like all it gets lumped together, it's all just actually I think one of the most liked responses to the Star Wars tweet was someone saying like, hey, why did you make Finn so tiny on the posters in China? Disney. Steven said earlier about companies playing both sides.
Yeah.
One piece of puzzle. I looked at the list of the top 10. And number 2 is 500.
Hey,
There would be a vampire except on
if the diversity in the indicator
even though Raiden from Metal Gear is a white guy, he's pretty diverse for having like a 95% cyborg body. Orson Brown and Conscience.
Hey man, I'd say that's pretty diverse.
Actually, famous bands that don't make video games.
How diverse is Raiden from Metal Gear according to the Blizzard scale?
True.
So I wanted to talk about the Blizzard scale. Like specifically, I wanted to talk to Steve about it.
Talked about it earlier. Got a question?
So yeah, what was the general opinion?
If you're from Egypt, you're 2.5 Brazils worth of diversity.
I think that
There
is,
it is. So.
the way that it is presented, or the way that they have talked about it, is that it is meant just as a launching point. That in video games, oftentimes the culture is very like white cis male centric, and if you're in that company and you're not a white cis male, that bring up those points without either being shut down quickly or without it being awkward, and that having a system that is very like quantitative about it. Like obviously there's not a quantitative way to say, oh, this is more diverse than this, but that it does bring up that point. So specifically, if you have a show who is like not very receptive to things like that, that can, like this can be the jumping off point where you can be like, oh, this like our game is not hitting any of these diversity things. Let's talk about why that is. I agree that it is just weird and feels yucky to try to assign that like that. But I also question what better ways there are to do it. Like obviously like be better people and like bring people into it who are more diverse, who make better decisions is ideally what we want, but it also feels unrealistic, and I feel like I understand why this exists.
Hard to sure, but there's too much subjectivity. Like, especially, also depends on like context. We're talking like a modern day, normal, not fantasy. That's entirely different than Overwatch, where like someone, if there was a 60-year-old soldier in modern day military shooter, pulled it on, it's like that incident that doesn't really fit. It's feasible, kind of, maybe, sort of at times. So, yes, if you tailor your specific data or even then it's kind of okay, but it's still like too subjective, and it's just like I don't know, it's disingenuous to attribute numbers to those kind of.
Yeah.
Like you could use actual statistics on like percentage of this well, any of most of the things like gender orientation, ethnicity, and you could like juxtapose that thing like the in the game against that, yes. But and maybe that's what their index does technically, and they did a really bad job of saying that.
Yeah, to step back real quick on two things. First of all, if you get here, I feel like you've already failed in your process of constructing like a diverse enough series of perspectives. If you have to like put numbers on to check if you hit it 8 times. Second of all, I think it's also important to note that they just years after the game came out, they like pat themselves on the back and show everybody.
Yeah.
No, we just sexually harass people. We don't fail to represent people.
Fine. The system is not specific to Blizzard. It's something
Activision,
right?
no, Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard, yeah.
Yeah, they made it.
They
Or
made
did they?
and
I thought it was
they used
separate.
it to make Call of Duty Vanguard.
technically it was made by King Games, but they're a subsidiary of Activision, so it falls under their umbrella. I do not wish to misrepresent your point, Patrick, so can I ask what you were saying before I got back in the room about yours?
Sure, sorry, I don't know, I don't remember at what point you came back in, but just that I agree that there is no way to, be quantitative about, how diverse a game is, but also that I feel like I understand the reasoning behind having a system like this as to generate a jumping off point for companies that may not otherwise the diversity in them currently to recognize that there is an issue.
I wish I knew there was a way to qualify what sort of tool could be used, because this is messy. I definitely get your point. But I think regarding what Devin said about introducing a number, like if you introduce a number, then you fail. But the problem that I see, or the problem I've seen raised that still resonates with me is that what you assume the middle to be like. And there's not necessarily so much of each of these things can exist on a spectrum in some way. But if you're talking about what you assume what the default normal ranges out and what everything ranges out in that front, the implication here is that you're talking about a completely fixed, otherwise blanket slate white cis male. That's assumed to be the default, which is untrue. Something that I think is important to emphasize is that that isn't an ethnicity in and of itself. And being white does not make you the default. Being anything does not make you the default. Being a majority does not make you the default. And that's the big thing that strikes us. Like, what we are speaking right now, English, is not the default. It is a language of its own. And for lack of a better term, we are very ethnic ourselves because we have an ethnicity. Just being white, just having this language does not mean we're not, well, we're not ethnic in a sense that there is no normal because everybody is. I hope I'm making this sense and not, yeah.
I see what you're saying, but how can we be sure that they're not, like, they're saying, like, white is normal and that white is normal in media? Because as we saw earlier, straight white cis man, beard cut, looking away from the camera with an explosion behind him is the default. And I think, like, saying that is the center because of how the representation in games right now is a fair statement.
That is a very fair point.
I'm sorry for stepping in.
But before Patrick came in, saying like, oh, what is this in the middle? Why is this the default? And after reviewing that, this could be think about this. Other not subjective. Numbers. So you don't have to be like, oh, but my male character, he is diverse. You should say, no, look at the chart. He's not. Even though you can't put numbers on 90% of these things, it's speaking in a different language, which I think is cool. So I agree that this is like a step in the correct direction, but at the same time, reading like the beauty category.
I was just about to talk about that. This has been drilling on me for the entire time we've been talking about it because all I can think about is gross dudes talking about which character is hotter than the other.
God, yeah.
And which one they should put in the game and how hot they should be. And that is gross, dude.
Well, I think that's not, I don't think it's like.
Well, that's not the point, but it's what it's saying subjectively. How hot do you think this character is? How beautiful do you think this character is? Which then again gets into a whole different can of worms, right?
It's not that they're trying to put hot characters in games. Because the farther you are, the less like.
The more points you get, the less points you get, the more Jeb Bush you get. I don't like what is this?
Well, I was saying it's like the further you get from the beauty standards is what we're high on the facial features.
Also, the
of course.
explicitly trying to put hot characters in games, like when they were designing the characters for
They have what they call the journal, like, bucket ability.
Oh, no.
True story. Including the 17-year-old. So they all went through multiple iterations of like, this character's not mine. So they are explicitly trying to make sense.
Well, yeah, but that's what makes this so, because this whole chart, the whole thing is subjective. Like you're saying, like the example you gave of the guy saying like, but my weight really, like that, like right, this is relative to this, right? It's like and the relativity to that is just no, I understand. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that like that makes sense, but I also agree with you in saying that this is the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. That's what happens. No, I mean, obviously there are a million ways to like empirically run the file. But I also think that it is something, if you're doing character design, how they compare it to whatever the condition standard is very important for having a fully realized character. Because, you know, it's very unfair, but like each of our levels of attractiveness as compared to whatever the norms are, affect the way that we're treated by other people, affect the professions that we're tempted to go into. And so it's something that has to be considered. And you'll notice sometimes in casting, it's jarring when somebody gets this wrong, right? Because you'll see somebody who is so good looking. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, there's no way this person is a chemistry grad. You know, the world would have pulled them out and forced them. They're like, no, we know you're smart enough to do this, but we have to give you millions of dollars to be in movies, you know, or something. And so, and there's other examples where, you know, like in the X-Files, you know, the two protagonists are both very attractive. You can find plenty of fan sites about each of them, but they also are not so conforming to conventional attractiveness that they feel like Ken and Barbie. They feel like hot FBI agents, and there's something about that you know contributes to the story. So I think, yeah, obviously, like there's all kinds of ways that this could go totally wrong in a very broy discussion. But I do think that if you are trying to fully realize how someone got to where they are in a certain position, that you may have to factor in their like level of like physical attractiveness and also like their style or how they can.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, taking a step back, like going back and doing a counterpoint for what I came into this conversation with. While I do think that in an ideal world, it is an interesting potential way to start conversations about things that might be wrong with a game or might be missing. I think that you do have to think whether it will be taken in that good way, whether it will be used to facilitate those good conversations, or whether CEOs will look at it and say, oh, make all the numbers as high as you can, and that's it. We don't talk about it at all. It does, like, presenting a form of quantification like this does kind of may for some people give the go-ahead to just say, oh, we could use this, and this is all we need. And I don't know how different
Just
that
make
is
Soldier 76
from
gay.
what's happening
What you're
already,
saying, yeah.
because like whether it encourages tokenism and whether that is better or worse than just having no diverse characters at all. There are a lot of questions like that I don't have your opinions on.
Context, like there's context where it makes sense, context where it's like kind of fun, like historical fiction game in a certain area that's going to be generally like fixed in terms of what these variables can be, and it doesn't have much to be. But for like something in the future, when's the run take place?
Like 2060.
Okay.
I mean, that was real last.
There's a lot of stuff. When's the first two? So it's much more reasonable for this kind of thing in this kind of situation. I still personally do think there's too much subjectivity because, like, yes, it's broadening the spectrum of like what people might consider, but then there's still the filter of which most of these filters are being filtered through people's heads of what they perceive of these things. And that can still cause, and again, it's a step in the right direction of it does promote more, but it's also still just very flawed.
On the topic of like content and programming, an ideal world, like video games can never be advanced as much as they are in the States. Every time you play a video game, all the experience and context of the real world with you. And as much as like people in the real world and people in a video game can map onto each other well, there's never like a total disconnect. Like they're like your race is more than just a skin color character customization option in real life. It comes with history with it. It comes with power structures taken with society that you live in, and assumptions that might come with it that can transfer to the game. Like, and when it comes to that default, like in Taylor's 503, there was not a default for gender. There's nothing that's like it's just basically you just customize yourself, and those are meant to be customized to the relationship you can have. Heritage is customized to dollars that are your voice type, all those things.
This was a big deal. I don't know if you remember this, but for a while, what was ended up happening was that the community of Rust was so disgusting and fucked up. Yeah, because of the character creation, they were actually having players play racial stereotypes and then feed into things like slavery and bigotry and hatred. So the developers ended up randomly generating every character when you spawn in, so it's nearly impossible to actually purposefully quantify that, and it eliminated the problem.
Does it eliminate the problem, or does
It slows down the problem, so, but it does, so. That was their response. Pretty fucked up.
Rust has a lot of baggage, just from what I've seen. And again, this could be a whole conversation on the other consequences. What sort of developers, or what sort of stories arrive next? From what I've seen.
I mean, the only way that ultimately I think this whole discussion comes back around is that the only way you can actually convince people with money to make your game more representative of things that you care about or things that your team cares about is by proving to them that doing that will make more money than the thing they are already doing. Which is ultimately what you're saying, Patrick, about this chart. But it's unfortunate that that is the only thing that can be done. So, and this only was done because people were like, wow, racists play that game. I don't want to play that game. So they did this. And does it actually fix the problem? Not really, but it sure does make it quieter. So.
Mm-hmm.
Tool use cases of like where it has been used.
It's like if it turns out that this graphic that you and then it's the business CEO is to like more diverse hiring practices or just to like things up with the characters so that they're not all white guys, then it's good, but I'm not sort of convinced that that's happening.
So for the last 10 minutes of this, let's all just break out and make a better version.
I mean, the practice of them actually using probably Vanguard now, because it was already in place when Overwatch was made. They just plugged it into Showman, right?
Overwatch Red for a whole bunch of.
Yeah. Yeah, because Vanguard, the main characters in the campaign were first. It was Australian, supposed to be Australian, white, British, British characters, black, Russian.
I love these
Yeah, it
names,
was
by the
like
way. Lucas Riggs, Wade Jackson, Richard Webb.
The names in the generator, clearly.
Was this the game? Did because I now I'm thinking about tokenism because there was the World War One game. Yeah, with the prosthetic arm girl.
No, that's Battlefield 5. Battlefield 5 was, so Battlefield 1, they, introduced civilians on the battlefield when they went to the Russian expansion. They're exclusive with the sniper class, which is like, everyone's like, hey, that's actually really accurate. And then something else, but then Battlefield 5, yeah, they're like, all right, women can fight on it. Full prosthetic limbs on World War II. They just kind of went super crazy with it, and everyone was just like,
Personally, I think this is a really, really strong and well done execution of putting prosthetics in video games by just giving you the option to have them. This is in Forza Horizon 5, and this has like widely been received as the best version of this so far. Because their character creator doesn't really have many, it has a broad swath of people from around the world, but you can't go and specifically change everything. They were able to use those models and just like plug and play some potato head parts in there.
Halo Infinite did it too. You can have from elbow or up to shoulder, or from knee up to thigh, I believe, any limb or combination.
What are you gonna say as well? Yeah. Well, he had it up first.
I just, I'm not gonna say either of these are plan, but like there's like strategies that sitcoms that I like that I think are really clever, and it's from Community. And something that I like about the way the Community deals with this is that most of the characters in Community's personal traits do not match with stereotypes. They are the opposite of stereotypes. But then external forces get comedy out of reminding those characters of stereotypes. So that simultaneously a lot of people who are defying the unjust structures that they're put in, but then the outside narrative acknowledges those at the same time. Like not doing it, it's also allowing people to be different than you might expect. And, you know, like I said, I don't think Dan Harmon's ever done. Like I noticed that was a strategy. That was clever. And then also in some of the Mike Shore shows, both Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Good Place, when they have non-white characters, you'll notice that they often have another another character in the same small group that's also from the same underrepresented category, so that one person doesn't become the de facto representative of that class. Even maybe if we were doing a random distribution, it's a little odd that you would have, you know, 2 people from this minority in this group of 7 people or whatever. And so, like, I think the fact that in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the Captain Pole and kind of has some qualities that are not stereotypically associated with blackness, that lets Terry Crews be this very physical muscle man because he is not the only black person that you're seeing, so you don't have to worry about the show saying all black people are extra physical and athletic and muscular. And so, you know, and like in The Good Place, you know, it has this big bad attitude, and there's another smaller character, Vicky, who's very scheming and sharp, and so like again, like those are not get out of jail free cards, but I've noticed both of those like working in terms of like defining diversity. Have, you know, because at the end of the day, most of the time you're still only going to have 5, 7, 10, whatever people are working. That's the entire world for your audience. So
I would say the moral of the story, whatever you want to take from it, but also talk to people. Not just because it makes me a good person, I feel self-actualization, but project in the closet or whatever, like you, on the numbers afterwards, see what you don't make sense.
Good sentiment.
Yeah. Uh, I actually have one serious recommendation, which is, since these talks are going online, I highly recommend everybody check out Drew Ladd's video on cross-cultural representation. He did that 2 hours ago, I want to say, and he was specifically talking about how other people depict blackness and how black story writers and actors depict blackness. And it was a talk that really resonated with me. So explain how people should try to represent other people who are not your own, but also be aware of your limitations and what sort of pitfalls you can run into. And definitely ask Stephen how to reach that online, but I think that was a really good talk. That's very salient with what we discussed right now.
Just to clarify, you can actually go online on the schedule. Every single one has been hyperlinked to a WebEx.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that.
Do I turn this off now?
We need more tall Mario Brothers.
Wait, where's the camera?